Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are going to be talking to you about our replication study that we did for this semester's project. My name is Megan Cater.
Tanea Scott.
I'm Jessica. I'm Alyssa Samansky. Jessica DeVersi.
All right, so like I said, for our replication project this semester, our group decided to look at an article by Linda Hayes and Carol Van Camp. The article is titled Increasing Physical Activity of Children During School Recess. So we wanted to look at this because our group was really interested in learning about something that had to do with like taking steps, increasing physical activity, those types of things. And this was really easy for us to implement across different geological regions because we're all in different states. So we decided to look at this study. The study focused on elementary school children, and they looked at different things related to increasing physical activity. They used goal setting, reinforcement, self-management, and feedback to try to increase the steps of students during school recess.
The original study, there were 6 participants, 8-year-old girls, in an elementary school playground setting during regular school scheduled time and unstructured recess. They used the primary Fitbit and a paper to record the data. And the target behavior was physical activity. Oh, and a Fitbit application, I'm sorry. And then during the intervention phase, there was reinforcement, self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback. And the data collection was the total number of steps during a 20-minute unstructured recess. And this was a single subject A-B reversal design. The initial baseline, the original Fitbit was covered with masking tape. The participants were not allowed to look at the number of steps. During the intervention, the Fitbit was uncovered. The participants' 4 prior steps count total. And the reversal baseline Fitbit was then covered with masking tape again, and no feedback was provided. In the reintroduction to the intervention, the Fitbit was uncovered again. The participants received it for something step count. And the participants were given a reward during the intervention. The goals were 10% increase. And once that increased, 20% after the goal was met. And to go from 20% and after the 2 consecutive goals, then and then 40. The IOA was a secondary Fitbit to be used to prove that the data was reliable. Okay. Again, the data was collected 6 participants. During the remainder of the session, let me see, I didn't write nothing down. Oh, goodness, hold on, let me get my sheets. I can't word that one. Overall, the participants' total steps improved by 40% during the intervention phase than from the baseline phase. That's it. Keep going to the next one. In conclusion, during the intervention, there was reinforcement, self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback. There were some limits, which I found myself, with the Fitbit application because it doesn't sync properly, which we know this from electronics.
For the literature, a lot of the information that was found was really started back in the history of it. The reason why a lot of these experimenters chose to study obesity is becoming such a an issue, and in the United States, especially, it's an they consider it almost an epidemic, especially in adults and a lot of adolescents. So a lot of experimenters are looking to find ways to increase physical activity. To eat for and a lot of it is primarily for health reasons. So the first study that I'm going to discuss is from Matthew Norman, and he evaluated the effects of the intervention package, which also included self monitoring, goal setting, feedback to increase the physical activity of in his study, there were three males and one female. They were ages 39 to 59 years old, but they were recruited using flyers within the community. They did use a pedometer to record the number of steps taken each day. Overall, he suggests that this type of intervention is successful and can be used to increase physical activity among healthy adults. The study is from Jeffrey Van Warmer. He examined whether or not a pedometer-aided self-counseling intervention could increase the physical activity of overweight adults. His study included two females and one male, ranging in ages 32 to 52. They were I found this interesting that they were self-referred by phone. The physical activity was defined as any activity that resulted in recording steps by pedometer. So it seems like a very almost open-ended type of physical activity that they were really focusing on. He indicated that the results of this pedometer-based self-monitoring and e-briefing intervention can, in fact, increase physical activity of overweight adults. And another study that we reviewed, was from Carol Van Camp and Linda Hayes. And this particular study was conducted to partially replicate the study that we did. This study was conducted on their school playground. The results indicated that both the self-management and contingency management, the self-monitoring, goal setting, feedback, and tangible rewards were sets during the intervention phases. This study also suggests that Fitbits are successful and a reliable method for assessing steps per minute, and also suggest a measure physical activity of school-age children within a school environment. So this just kind of solidifies some of the results that we also found in our replication study.
For the participants in setting, our participants were ages between 22 and 43, all in the Eastern time zone and in the MA and ABA program at Ball State. And we all had an interest in increasing physical activity. The setting was different for everyone, different geological location throughout the US. Each participant chose their preferred location, either indoor or outdoor, to their step, baseline and intervention data collected over a period of 4 weeks. To define our behaviors, we had unstructured physical activity, which is walking or running during a designated time. Walking is defined as moving at a standard pace or average speed by alternating raising and placing down each foot on the ground or floor without both feet off the ground at the same time consistently for exactly 20 minutes during a designated time for physical activity. An example of this is a participant took her dog on a walk with her for 20 minutes after she got home from work. And a non-example is a participant walked around the Running is defined as moving at a rapid pace by alternating raising and placing down each foot on the ground or floor without both feet off the ground at the same time consistently for exactly 20 minutes during a designated time physical activity. An example of this is the participant consistently ran 3 miles on the treadmill for exactly 20 minutes. And a non-example is a participant ran around her backyard looking for her lost cat for at least 2 minutes. The materials we used were a Fitbit to count the number of steps for each participant, a timer to indicate specified 20-minute sessions, download the results, a pedometer app on the iPhone to record step count for IOA, masking tape to cover the step count during the baseline phase, a computer to document the results, a spreadsheet on Google Docs for each participant to document, and our tangible reinforcers, which we could choose from a bowl of ice cream, a favorite Starbucks beverage, charcoal face mask, or a favorite adult beverage. For the data collection, all participants were both primary data collectors and reliability data collectors for themselves. Data collectors used a Fitbit to measure the steps taken during physical activity. They recorded individual count at the end of each session on the Google Docs spreadsheet, and then downloaded step count each day on the Fitbit app or website. The reliability data collectors used the iPhone to measure step count for IOA and recorded the step count on the Google Docs spreadsheet. And then this is the spreadsheet that we used with all of our names to the left in each session, as well as our goals that are on the bottom.
Okay, so like we said, the design that we used is based off of the original study, which was a reversal design or an ABAB design. So for this, it was baseline intervention, reversal back to baseline, and then reintroduction to intervention. So for the initial baseline phase, this is what we were talking about with like the masking tape and everything like that. So all of us had a Fitbit that we used to document the total number of steps taken. We covered our Fitbit with a piece of masking tape so we couldn't see the steps that were on the Fitbit. So we made sure that the Fitbit was set at 0 so we could start counting exactly from that point to the 20-minute mark. So we participated in this during the same time frame, but not exactly on the same day or exactly the same time. Obviously, like we're all working, we're all in school, so it was hard to come up with a day that we could all do it at the same exact time. But we all did it for a 20-minute timer for each session to indicate that the session has ended. So we wore the Fitbits on our right wrist to maintain consistent data collection. We recorded our own step count, and then once we were done with each session, we went on and onto the Google Doc and put all of the steps in that we took. We downloaded all of our data collected to the Fitbit application at the end of each session. However, there were some issues with syncing the Fitbit to the Fitbit application, so the data was not able to be uploaded to the designated shared Google document at the end of each session, unfortunately. And then we used selected participants using the iPhone pedometer as a reliability measure to track the individual step count during designated sessions. So we needed it to be, I think, 3 out of the 5 sessions we needed reliability count. So we split that up before we actually started each session. And then those participants recorded their total step count. Oh, sorry, can you go back one? Thank you. Those participants recorded their total step count that was tracked by the iPhone pedometer, but also what was tracked with the Fitbit to kind of see if the iPhone and the Fitbit collected the same amount of steps or not. So that was our reliability checker. Good, thank you.
Sorry.
No, you're good. So then for the intervention phase, we basically did the same thing. The only thing that was different is that we uncovered the Fitbit screen. So we took off that piece of masking tape, and we were able to look at our step count. And actually that was encouraged to view the total step count throughout each session to hopefully increase the amount of steps that were being taken. And then, like I said, we wore it on the same wrist. We did the 20 minutes. It was exactly the same, other than the fact that we did not have the masking tape on it. And then goals were given prior to each session, so we knew exactly what goal we were trying to reach. Individual step goals for the initial intervention phase were determined by the average of each subject's last 4 stable sessions during the baseline phase. So we went through and looked at our baseline and then increased it by 10% for the first goal. So the primary goal was a 10% increase and then rose to 20% after subjects met 2 consecutive session goals. Participants immediately rewarded themselves with one tangible item that we talked about before. So it's like a bowl of ice cream, an adult beverage, Starbucks, charcoal face mask. So we got to choose one of those if we met our goal. Reinforcers were chosen based on the completion of the preference assessment from each participant. So in the beginning of the study, we kind of talked about what we would all like to get as a reinforcer. So that's how we got that list. And then all participants were given feedback at the conclusion of each session by each other.
Okay, as Megan stated, the reversal to baseline phase was identical to the initial baseline phase. All the participants, we all utilized the same Fitbits to document the total number of steps during our unstructured physical activity, which again consisted of either walking or running, and we were able to choose whether it was indoor or outdoor setting. Based on our environment and preference. We also, again, covered back the Fitbit with masking tape, so we weren't allowed to look at our total step count for each of these sessions. And we had to make sure that Fitbit was set back again to 0 at the beginning of each session. We also, again, were not able to complete this during the same time frame. It was during the same week, but due to our busy schedules, we only could do it at our convenience. So we also used the 20-minute timers, so we didn't go over our time. Again, we used the right wrist to maintain the consistent data collection. We also, again, went back and recorded our own results on the Google document spreadsheet. And then, unfortunately, we did have some technical difficulties with syncing the Fitbit, so we're not able to upload the data to be used on the Google document Fitbit app. We all did use the same application for the reliability data when we use the iPhone, so we can have consistent reliability measurement. We again went back and recorded our own step count using the iPhone pedometer application. So for the reintroduction to intervention phase, again, all of us, the participants, we utilized the same Fitbit throughout the step, and we again either walk or ran indoor or outdoors. We did not use masking tape during this phase because we were encouraged to actually look at our Fitbits throughout each session. Again, we didn't complete this on the same day or time, but definitely during the same time frame. We used a timer again for each session and wore our Fitbits on the right wrist to maintain consistent data collection. We immediately uploaded our data to the Google document spreadsheet. And again, due to syncing issues with the Fitbit, we were not able to upload the data from the Fitbit app. For this phase, the goals were also given prior to each session. Our reinforcers were based on the completion of the preference assessment that Megan discussed earlier. For this session, though, we were given 3 goals for this final intervention phase, which started at 20%, then increased to 30%, and then 40%. We were able to receive as many as 3 reinforcers if our goals were met during this intervention phase. And just to note that our reinforcers were definitely age appropriate, and the max value of them $3. And then all participants were given feedback at the conclusion of each session.
So for the IOA data, as Meg said earlier, we needed at least 3 sessions to collect IOA data to make things easy. We just decided to draw a name from a hat, and whoever's name got picked first, that was going to be the first session, and then we did that through all 5 sessions in each phase. That way we all had the same amount of reliability data collected. We used a total count IOA, which is the simplest and crudest form of IOA, and we did that per session. So we took the smallest count and we divided it by the largest count, and we times it by 100 to get the percentage. As we said earlier, the primary data collector was the Fitbit, the reliability data collector was the iPhone. We compared those 2 numbers, and that's how we got the numbers to plug into our formula. Each participant, as I stated, were ranked. You can see on the chart in the participant section, it's never the same order of participants collecting reliability data. In the phase, we have baseline 1 through 5, intervention, back to baseline, back to intervention, collecting reliability data throughout the entire experiment. And none of our reliability data was under 80%. The closest one was 81.9, but every reliability data we collected was above 80%, which was awesome to see. This is a graph of our IOA data. What we did is found the percentage and we graphed it, so it was a nice visual, and you can see how reliable, although we never met 100% reliability, we were always above 80%, and some phases were higher than others.
For the treatment fidelity, the training session was conducted through a Google Hangouts due to each participant living in a different location. We did a step-by-step breakdown of each component, and ongoing group meetings and communication to and discuss our future phases. We also shared the Google Doc for all collected data and individualized goals. And then you will see the procedural checklist that we used. It starts with what to do prior to baseline, the initial baseline, and then on the next one, there is the reversal to baseline and the final intervention. And each section goes through the exact steps of what to do during each phase.
This is the data that I personally collected throughout the experiment. It had baseline, my baseline range, my intervention, which is the reinforcement period, average and range, as well as the reversal, and then the final intervention. My favorite part was probably the last intervention because I'm not used to walking. And my least favorite part was the initial baseline because it was really hard to get back into a swing of walking for 20 minutes a day. Real struggle for me.
And this is my data that was the best part of mine that I did get to increase my steps from the beginning, the baseline, into the end. I didn't think I was going to be able to do that because I would have to remember daily to do the 20 minutes of walking. And of course, it was winter in Pittsburgh, so I had to do it indoors. Um, and that's it.
So the part that I found most difficult about this project was like rewarding myself with the tangible reinforcers. Because we didn't specifically state that we wouldn't have that reinforcer if we didn't meet our goal. So, like, for example, like I would eat ice cream in the middle of the day and then I would go and walk. And then if I met my goal, I would have to have more ice cream. So it was just difficult for me to like actually reward myself because I mean, it was just like walking 20 minutes, but I had to like stick with that and reward myself based on that list of reinforcers. So that was kind of hard for me, unexpectedly hard, but
And this is my data that I collected. Just like Megan said, I found it really difficult to give myself that reinforcement, just because I knew that there was ice cream around, and I think it would have done a lot better perhaps if I had someone physically take the ice cream away from me and say, "You cannot eat this until you do your 20 minutes of walking."
Okay. I found that actually I was more motivated to complete this experiment because I have a wedding, or I am getting married July. So I'm more motivated to increase my physical activity to get in shape for my wedding more so than I was to act myself with ice cream. In fact, I really didn't want to use ice cream, but I did. I will tell you that I did occasionally go to Starbucks and reward myself with a tea, but because that is my favorite beverage there. But overall, like I really didn't have any issues with, and I think my primary motivation was just having a wedding.
These are the graphs from all of the 5 participants that engaged in this experiment. As you can see by looking at it, we all have a lower baseline except for one that came to reverse the baseline, similar to her. Two of us had a low baseline, higher intervention, low baseline, higher intervention again. The lines on the graph indicate our own personal goals. These are the 10% and 20% in the first intervention, and the 20, 30, and 40% in the final intervention. 3 out of 5 of us met all 5 goals from the very beginning to the very end. All of us participants met the first intervention goals, which is 10% and 20%. And then Megan actually made her 20% goal in the second intervention, skipped over her 30% goal, and made her 40%. And Tania made her 30% goal in the second intervention and did not meet her 20 or 40%. And this could be due to her increased step counts during the reversal of the baseline. This is a bar graph of our average count per participant. So A is baseline, B is intervention. And you can see the dramatic change between baselines and intervention per participant. Oh, I'm sorry, Alyssa, can you go back real quick?
Oops, sorry.
And then we visually have an increase in step goals, but as a whole, we increased our steps by 42.4%. The mean for the baseline phase was 1,660 steps, and the mean for the intervention phases was 2,364 steps. Between those, we did have a 42.4% increase in steps, which is similar to the original study. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry.
Okay, so there were several limitations that we found in this study, which is not uncommon for research. There's always limitations. Obviously, there was a difference in age, gender, and geological location of participants. They were third graders, and we're all in this master's program 22 plus. So that's a limitation. The reliability data collection method appears to be unstable. So, like using an iPhone in addition to using the Fitbit was unstable at some points. But like Jessica said, the IOA was never lower than 81%. So that was actually really good. So another limitation, the participants were supposed to download all the data collected to the Fitbit application at the end of each session. But like we said before, there were issues syncing the Fitbit to the Fitbit application, so the data was not able to be uploaded to the designated Google Doc at the end of each session, which was unfortunate. In addition, the phase changes were predetermined rather than waiting for stable data after each phase. So in the original study, they had 5 sessions of baseline, 5 sessions of intervention, and then 5 and 5 again. And then we just copied that exact same method per the professor's request. So we didn't wait for the stable data to be there. We just switched after 5 sessions. Also, the use of pedometers in general is kind of limited. They don't really know if they work as well as people think, and then different brands may produce like different results or unreliable step counts. There were different types of Fitbits that were utilized within our group. I know I have a fake Fitbit, and then others had like the real Fitbit. So I don't know if that causes a big difference, but it's a limitation none the least. And there were various versions of the iPhone that were used for reliability. So some of us used like a tracker app. Some of us used the just like the tracker on the actual iPhone itself. So that was a limitation, that we didn't all use the same exact app. And then the self-reinforcement aspect of the study, like we talked about, there was an over-reliance on the honor system that we self-reinforced. So like Caitlin and I said, it was difficult to self-reinforce. Whereas if someone else was reinforcing us for that behavior, it would have been a little more reliable and valid.
Another limitation is that we actually limited our physical activity to just running and walking, either indoor or outdoor, because there are so many various types of physical activity, and we felt that this would be best to limit it so we could have our data be more reliable. Because we are limited to, like, we don't have playground equipment and things like that to replicate that type of physical. Also, another limitation would be that some of those results could be influenced by the fact that we did know what the purpose was before this. We conducted the study, and we also knew what the results were prior to the study, us replicating the study as well. And of course, feedback that was provided by the other participants due to the nature of the study. Feedback could have been possibly influenced by a treatment fidelity checklist was not utilized during this type of study, and due to the nature of the study, it's obvious that we were not able to use direct observations for the participant behavior because it wasn't feasible due to our location and settings. So also the Fitbit app did not consistently record the number of steps taken for all participants. And that way we were, again, not able to use that data. Overall, this type of intervention package, which include the reinforcement, self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback, is definitely an option to increase unstructured physical activity, either with adults or children across the board. Some further research that the goal setting standards should be further investigated, and that the method of feedback should also be further researched. Reliability method also needs some further studies due to the type of apps, the various types of apps that are available to track Parthenon. So I guess we're considering using maybe just certain types of apps, or finding out which ones work the best. Also, using these Fitbits among children. There's some limited studies that have been conducted, so we feel that there should be more investigation to ensure that a Fitbit is an appropriate tool to measure physical activity in children. And these are our references. And that is it.
All right, nice job, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I wrote a couple questions. I have a few comments about the presentation. I guess I'll start with you guys did a great job just having all the information that you need for the presentation. But I've been talking with some of the groups at the end just to discuss the best way to lay it out for the write-up of the presentation. So the typical formula for writing an introduction would be to state the important problem, which you guys mentioned, why is this an important behavior to target? And then to discuss some of the supporting literature, like what have previous researchers been done? And then usually the second paragraph in the introduction is a description of the study that you plan to replicate. And then the last one is your purpose, which is to replicate that specific study with a group of graduate students who are living in different locations. So you have all the info, and it's good for the presentation, but that would be the way I would recommend laying it out for when you write the introduction for the there were a couple questions that I had about the procedure. That feed that typical like because you're all doing the sessions at a group to deliver that feedback. Were you partnered up with?
We were not partnered up with people, but on our doc slide, we were able to see different step counts. So, for example, today I was really excited that I did my step count early. I looked in and I saw that Aitlin had already completed her step for the day. And so even though it was like I wasn't sure how many steps she got, I reinforced on her ability to get up even earlier than I got up and step count. So we utilized our Google Docs, and then we also met almost every week throughout the session of the experiment, and we were in constant contact with each other through text message. So we were able to verbally and through texting.
Okay, so that would be something that I would include a description of in the write-up as well, like the various ways in which feedback was delivered, and also if it varied. So sometimes it might be verbal through the Google Docs, or the another way through a text message. It would be delivered shortly after a session, or it might have been during the group meeting. You guys should probably talk about the various ways in which you delivered feedback, and then maybe as a limitation talk about it varied throughout the just in case you have effects of the feedback that could have influenced performance, but it wasn't necessarily delivered in a consistent manner throughout. It was in various different ways that you could be delivering that feedback for the participants. And one thing I wasn't sure, I didn't see on the treatment integrity checklist was that feedback was delivered. Was that one of the steps on the treatment integrity? Worth mentioning as well that it could have been included as one of the steps if it was something that was supposed to be consistently delivered to the participants. And then I had one question about, you guys mentioned to sync up the application with the Google Docs, but weren't you able to just look at what the number was on the Fitbit and then manually enter into the Google Doc, or what was the exact issue? I wasn't totally following.
We did enter everything manually, but with the original study, they did write everything down, but then they also utilized that Fitbit app to upload all of their tracking of their steps. We tried to use that Fitbit app, but I know me personally, it would not sync up. So we could, because there was a way to upload that data in addition to what we, the honor system of us, writing down our step count. I mean, some of us took screenshots too, but just to have that secondary data, that nice. And, after looking at, reading other studies, that is one of the big issues, is that the syncing of the Fitbit app.
Okay. And then was there a way to the iPhone, or you had to just manually enter it as well?
We also manually entered that as well.
Okay. I was actually very impressed by how reliable they seem to be. Your IOA is actually pretty impressive, and I think I've had another group use two devices before and compare them for reliability purposes, and there was a lot of discrepancies. So technology is just getting better, or if you guys got lucky, or the fact that you guys used the same application, it was just on a different device. But I was pretty impressed by that. I had one question about the IOA. It looked like you guys each had an IOA in each phase, correct? So did each of you only collect IOA then for one session within each of those 5-day phases, or it was three out of 5 you guys collected them for?
Multiple IOA data for the ones that we just documented were the ones that we picked the participants for.
Okay, so if you have IOA data for each participant for 3 out of the sessions or something like that, or what I would do is I would report the percentage of sessions that you collected IOA for 3 out of 5 for each person, what is that for each phase you've collected IOA for 60%, and then I would be sure to report your average IOA for each participant for the baseline phase and for the intervention phase, so that you see, because you guys have actually collected a nice amount of IOA data, but I would report it each individual participant, average IOA, and just say how many sessions you collected for the IOA, and that in the write-up. Is also worth mentioning, and you could actually change how you write it in the operational definition, is that you always want to try to match up your operational definition with how you're measuring it. And there is a way with those applications, you don't necessarily know that the participant was only walking or running, right? You guys said that those were going to be the behaviors, and so perhaps it's even as just like a limitation of the that is just going to be measuring step counts regardless of what your physical activity is. Or you could change what the operational definition was and stick to it being just the step counts in a 20-minute period, and then just give walking and running as your examples of the behaviors, recommended activities. However, any behavior that required that count would have essentially counted. Just like that one, I think that there was one of the studies that you guys mentioned that, you're limited to the measurement tool that you have. And so you could do it one of two ways. You guys could just say that these were your, the behaviors that you were supposed to be, as your operational definition, but then as a limitation, say you don't know for sure if those were the only behaviors, or just expand the operational definition to include any activity that would have count in that 20-minute window. And then one thing I just wanted to clarify, I do think it's always best to wait for stability before you would enter a new phase. But for some of these projects, the way they had done it in the original studies is that they had a set window of time, like a 1 week period or something, which is going to, at times, require you to enter a new phase when your data are not that stable. So I always honor what they did in the original study, but just as a behavior analyst, we all know that the most ideal way to make changes in an experimental design is to wait until you have that stability. That being said, your data are actually pretty impressive, and they were quite stable for a number of you guys. And I would mention that you really have evidence for a functional relationship for 4 to 5 of you guys.
Mm-hmm.
In the reverse debate, because your step count didn't go down, which is good for your physical and experimental. But I emphasize that you guys do have support for 4 out of 5 of the really. I think that what you guys mention is important whenever you're pursuing your own reinforcers. That can be challenging. You really have discipline to not just give yourself those preferred items regardless of how you've done, or to give it to yourself beforehand. And so that was, and also you guys did know the purpose of the study as well. So these are always important things to mention. And let me see if there's anything else. I think you also did a nice job describing, sort of interpreting the data that you have collected when you guys were showing the results. Just be sure in the write-up to also not just put the data on in a table, but to actually go through it, so that it just for each phase to describe the range for the baseline phase for Alyssa was from this to this with an average of this. And then also, the one thing I like to do is whenever I'm going through the results and talking about each phase is to identify some sources of variability. So if you see a spike in the data, or if you see a dip, a lot of times the participants have a pretty good idea of what may have contributed to that variability. And so it would be good to also mention a few of the, I was sick that day and I was on the couch, or I forgot to charge my phone, or something like that. And so I would go through the individual graphs and mention, I was traveling that weekend and I did a 5-mile walking tour or something, so that you can describe a little bit of what may have caused some of the variability. And I think that that's always good to do as well. Okay, let me see if there's anything else I wrote down, but I think that that's pretty much it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Really, you guys had a very successful study. So a lot of times I'll ask, well, what could have had the intervention been a bit more effective? So could you have changed the reinforcer? Could you have changed the way in which you guys, may have set your goals? But for you guys, has anyone actually continued to use the application, and have you noticed any sort of long-term changes in your behavior after participating in the project?
Well, I can vouch for that because, I continued. Wait, Jessica, are you talking?
No, you can go.
Okay, sorry. It's hard because I couldn't hear you. Sorry. I have continued with it personally, more so. I really needed it was a great study for me because I needed a kickstart getting back into my exercise routine, especially because I wanted to get in shape for our wedding. So that was kind of a little hidden motivation there behind my continuation of this physical activity for me. And I tend to sit for long periods of time when I study, and so it gives me a good excuse to kind of get up and move around and get some exercise in.
That's good. And
Sorry.
no, go ahead.
On my walk, I I used to just pick the simplest goal, like the big, and set study up to it. I don't need to go do like 20 minutes of walking, but I have up my goal and I do try to meet easy to meet anymore.
Anyone else? You guys still walking, still running?
I did find that like, having like the masking tape on it and then taking the masking tape off, the masking tape was kind of like it was hard for me to not look at my watch and like not see what steps I was at. So now I find that I'm like looking at my watch more and like noticing how long it takes me to get certain steps. So that's kind of helped me just like see where I'm at and see like how big of steps I'm taking and just kind of get a good idea of how long it's going to take me to walk a certain place, which was an interesting like result of the study. So I liked that.
Well, that actually leads me to one last question, because whenever you have a study like this, you have multiple aspects to the intervention. So you have the self-monitoring piece, you have the goal setting, you have the reinforcers that are in place. You also have a group of participants who you're probably pleased. And so I would say for each of you guys, what would you say? We would have to tease it out with a figure out what's the most effective component to the intervention package. But what do you think behavior the
For me, members, like you said, I'm a real people pleaser. Like I could care less about getting the Starbucks coffee and like those other tangibles, like the ACE, but I could live without them. So I think it was down to making sure I was doing my part and withholding piece that I said to do, holding myself and my group accountable.
I attest to that.
Yep.
We don't ever want to let anyone else down, and we have to try our best.
Yeah, I would have said
to make
the same
sure
thing.
in the right manner.
Yeah.
So self-monitoring, goal setting, that stuff's not nearly as important as making sure you're keeping your groups happy, which is very funny because when I have groups who say that, usually all of them do quite well, like the results are quite well. And then I'll have some groups who like no one met their goals at all. And so it was kind of like, well, like I think they were also influenced by each other's performance because they were just like, nobody else is actually hitting their goals either, so it's okay.
Yeah.
But it's like it's either like all or nothing. You rarely will get one where you have a mixture of results of like some are hitting it and not, and then a lot of times when they all look there was some pressure that folks will put on themselves to make sure that they're not the one outlier in the group in which they're never meeting the goals. So I think that just pleasing the other group members as well as even like getting a good grade on the project. They're some possible features that are worth discussing because it's not necessarily part of the design, but I think there's other variables that come into play for projects like this. So anyway, great job on the presentation. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of it. And we can end the recording now.
Great.